Hans Christian Andersen's story, The Little Match Seller Girl, it's up to you to decide. Is it a happy ending or not? It was terribly cold and nearly dark on the last evening of the old year, and the snow was falling fast. In the cold and the darkness, a poor little girl with bare head and naked feet roamed the streets. She went along with her naked feet, which were quite red and blue from the cold. In an old apron, she carried a handful of matches and a bundle of them in her hand. But nobody had bought anything from her all day, nor had anyone given her even a penny of money. So she crept along. Poor little thing. She was the picture of misery. Snowflakes fell on her long, fair hair, which hung in curls on her shoulders, but she regarded them not. Lights were shining from every window, and there was a smell of savory roast goose, for it was New Year's Eve. Yes, she remembered that. In a corner between two houses, she sank down and huddled herself together. She drew her little feet underneath her, but she could not keep off the cold. She didn't dare go home, for she had sold no matches all day, nor could she bring home even a penny of money. Her father would surely beat her. Her poor little hands were almost frozen from the cold. Ah, perhaps a lighted match might be some good. If only she could take one out and light it against the wall, just to warm her little fingers. So she drew one from her apron, and scratch! How it sputtered as it burnt, gave off a warm, bright light, like a little candle as she held her hand over it. It was so warm that the little girl felt as if she was sitting in front of a large iron stove. How the fire burned, so beautifully warm that she stretched out her feet as if to warm them. When lo, the match went out, and the stove vanished, and all that was left was a half-burnt matchstick in her hand. So she quickly lit another match. Scratch! It burst into flame. And where the light fell on the wall, it became as transparent as a veil, and she could see inside the room. And inside was a table covered by a snowy white tablecloth, with a savory supper service with roast goose and apples and dried plums. What was even more wonderful is the roast goose hopped off of the dish and waddled up to the little girl with a knife and a fork in his chest. And then the match went out, and all that was left was a cold, damp wall in front of her. So the little girl lit another match. Scratch! And this time she found herself under a glorious Christmas tree, and thousands of tapers burned on the green branches. She lifted up her arm to touch one when the match went out. The Christmas lights rose higher and higher until they looked like stars in the sky. And then the little girl saw a star fall, leaving behind a bright streak of fire. "Someone's dying," said the little girl, for her old grandmother, the only one who had ever loved her, who is now dead, said that every time a star fell, a soul went up to God. So the little girl took out another match. Scratch! And she was surrounded by light. And in the brightness, she saw her old grandmother, clear and shining, yet mild and loving in her appearance. "Oh, grandmother," cried the little girl, "please don't leave me. Take me with you. I know you'll vanish when the match goes out. You'll disappear like the large stove or the roast goose or the glorious Christmas tree." And the little girl made haste to light the rest of the bundle of matches. And their light shone brighter than the noonday, and her old grandmother had never appeared more large or more beautiful. And she took her up in her arms, and they flew off into the sky in brightness and in joy, where there was no hunger, and there was no cold, and there was no pain, for they were with God. In the dawn of the morning, there lay the poor little one, with pale cheeks and smiling mouth, leaning against the wall. She had frozen to death on the last evening of the year. The poor little child still lay in the stiffness of death, holding a handful of matches which were half burnt. She tried to warm herself, said some, but nobody could imagine what beautiful thing she had seen, nor into what glory her and her grandmother had entered.